Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at the Beelink Mini PC. It is an 8-core Ryzen 7 PC with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 500 gigabytes of storage. It is a low-powered Nook-style PC that is designed to not take up much room on your desk or for mounting on the back of a TV. But how does this one perform? Let's go ahead and find out. Alright, so for disassembly, there are 4 Phillips screws, one in each corner. I've already pulled them out. This right here was actually just to pull it up and make it easy to get to. Alright, so on the inside, the first thing you see is you can put an SSD in here, which is really nice actually. That kind of surprised me. So I'm going to have to do some more disassembly, and I'll be back with you guys in just a minute. Alright, so for disassembly, there are 4 Phillips screws, one in each corner. I've already pulled them out. This right here was actually just to pull it up and make it easy to get to. All right, so on the inside, the first thing you see is you can put an SSD in here, which is really nice actually. That kind of surprised me. So I'm going to have to do some more disassembly, and I'll be back with you guys in just a minute. All right, so this isn't too hard to disassemble. You got one screw right here. I've already pulled these out, by the way, and then one on this corner and one on this corner over here. You simply then just grab this, give it a little tug. Be careful because you do have cables underneath that are holding this serial ATA and the fan on. And then you could just simply fold it up and over. Now at this point you can disconnect the cables if it makes you feel safer. But then on the inside you can see you have a 2280 Nvme drive right here. See if I can focus on see it shows this size right there. And then you have your RAM slots, and it actually shows right here your speed, if it would focus. If I can get to that. So it shows 3200 DDR4. So yeah, that's pretty much everything in there. I would like to see the other side, but I really don't feel like disassembling this thing anymore. It was kind of a pain to get in here the first time. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and put this thing back together and see how it performs. Before we get into the performance, let's talk about the specs. This PC has a Ryzen 7 5800H. This is an 8-core, 16-thread CPU that is Zen 3 based, and it boosts up to 4.4 gigahertz. It also is a laptop CPU. The CPU does run amazingly well though. I felt it was very snappy just doing standard tasks, and it actually slightly edges out my 11800H Intel gaming or CPU I have on my gaming laptop, at least for multi-threaded tasks. The downside, though, to this device is the graphics. It is using Vega 8 graphics, which are aging at this point, and you can tell. I mean, it would have been okay a few years back, but now it's kind of, you know, it's been succeeded by newer graphics like the 680M and 780M. That being said, it does still support HDMI 2.0, so you can output 4K at 60 Hertz. Another issue I did find with it is there's no adjustment in the BIOS for the VRAM, so you are stuck with 3 gigabytes of shared memory. For the rest of the PC, as I showed in the teardown, it has 16 gigabytes of RAM that can be upgraded to 64 gigabytes. This is DDR4, and it has a 512 gig Gen 3 NVMe SSD that, according to the specs, can be upgraded to 2 terabytes. Also, you have the 2.5-inch SSD slot, which is nice if you wanted to turn this thing into a mini file server, though the Ethernet is only a gigabit. So with that all the way, let's go ahead and talk about the benchmarks. I started out with Cinebench, scoring a 10,105 for multi-core and 1,420 for single-core. In comparison, my Intel 1100H only scored a 9,733 for multi-core and slightly edged out the 5800H with a 1,433 in single-core. But that's within margin of error for Cinebench. Next up, I ran 3D Mark. I chose the Night Raid score, which is designed for PCs with integrated graphics. The PC gave me a score of 16,699, whereas a newer chip like the 680M scored nearly double from my Google search. I saw results stating 30,595. This is something I will be testing in the future. For my game testing, I use Razer Cortex. That gives me a nice little chart at the end of my play session for each game. All the games I tested, I played on low settings since this thing really couldn't handle any more than that, and I tested everything at 720p and 1080p. The first game I tested was CSGO, where I averaged around 100 frames per second during actual gameplay. It didn't seem to dip much during gameplay and handled this pretty well. Stepping up to 1080p, we saw the frame rate drop to around 85 on average, with one minor dip to about 60. Overall though, still an okay experience. Though if you're playing competitively with this game, you probably are going to end up suffering in the end. Next game on the list was Destiny 2. I hit on average about 65 frames per second, which isn't horrible for a game that's much newer than CSGO and the graphics are much better. Overall, it was a decent experience. Bumping up to 1080p with Destiny 2 is when it starts to get a little choppy. Your frame rates, I was sitting around 50 frames per second with it dipping a little bit at times down to like mid 40s. At this point, you're definitely kind of pushing what this thing can do, and I honestly wouldn't recommend it. Next game on the list is Final Fantasy XIV. At 720p, I averaged around 75 frames per second, dipped just a little underneath that, but usually stayed about 75. The problem with this game, at 720p, it just looks absolutely awful with low settings in my opinion. I just don't think it is worth it. Bumping up to 1080p, we then drop even more down to the low 40s, high 30s, and you're really starting to see the performance hit here. It does look quite a bit better jumping to 1080p, but I mean, unless you're used to a console and you can take these lower frame rates, I just say it's not worth it. Next game up was GTA 5 at 720p. Now this game was kind of all over the place, as you can see from the chart. It didn't really have any horrible dips, but you know, your low was probably about 65 frames per second and going up to about 130 on average. Like I said, it was really kind of all over the place. I'm not a big fan of the GTA engine. I don't think it's that well optimized. But yeah, this is what you're going to expect if you try to play the game with this PC. Jumping up to 1080p, I saw a little more consistency in the frames, hanging out at about 55 frames per second, and a little more playable if you don't want to see the constant, ups and downs in the frame rate. Though at 55 frames per second, you're still kind of pushing it in my opinion. Overall, this is a snappy little PC, but it is held back by aging tech. You are limited to PCI Gen 3 due to the CPU, and this is noted right on AMD's website. It's not due to any kind of configuration of the PC, it's just the CPU itself. You only have a gigabit LAN, which is fine for most people, but most newer PCs are coming with 2.5 gigabit at this point. The Vega 8 graphics will be acceptable for most people, but if you're trying to play games or anything, it's going to be a little outdated and you should probably pick up a different PC. Speaking of which, I picked up, where did it go? I've lost it, there it is. So for 50 bucks more, I picked up this one. I'm going to open this thing up next. It is basically another PC, just like that. Newer graphics using the 680M. It's got an AMD 6800H, I believe it is. But yeah, I'm going to do a video on that right as soon as I'm done with this one. Just to let you know, is it worth spending the extra 50 bucks to get a little bit more updated system if you're looking for this tiny form factor. Otherwise, that's everything I got for this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.